Hi, my name is Neville Douglas. It is the 31st of March 2019. What I'm going to cover today in this video is various, what are they? Okay, we're going to look at thermal cameras, we're going to look at hygrometers, Tramexes, and the different type of moisture meters that can be used.
So if you're going to get someone in to do a survey, if you suspect that you have rising damp or penetrating damp or condensation or whatever you want to call it, ingress, and they're going to use certain bits of equipment. Now, irrespective of what they use, I would say irrespective, but there are certain bits of kit which can be used and should be used for testing dampness, and there are certain ones which are not really calibrated for doing that. So I'm going to walk you through 3 examples, and we're going to talk about the calibration as well, and what the calibration test is. I'm not going to go into details, but it gives you an idea. When you're talking to someone, they should have calibrated the instrument that they're using for the RH, or what's known as the relative humidity of the environment where they're going to be are, so that the equipment is in equilibrium, which means the same as, there's no gain, there's no loss in regards to heat and temperature, or not temperature, but we're talking about humidity. So it should be at the same humidity level. It's like, you know, when you walk into a building and you're wearing glasses and it's cold outside, and then the glasses steam up, and then you know that the glasses are colder than the outside air, and you go into the inside air, so you're going to get condensation on the glass. It's a similar kind of thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about one. This is a classic example. This is a Protimeter. Now, this one is mine, and let me just switch over to see if we can get a better view, because this has got a macro view. There we go. So now we've got the macro view. So obviously when that's first switched on, there is a lot of kit that you can have with it. So you can have this instrument here, or this attachment, which is used for, let me just take the cap off. There we go. There we go. So that's used for looking at the dew point. So you can put that on tiles and other sort of non-porous cold surfaces, and this will help you to find out the relative humidity. That's plugged in to here. You have these, which are long probes. These would go into I don't know, let's say for instance you were drilling into the brickwork, and you wanted to get past the plaster, and you wanted to take a deep reading of the plaster work, then you would, a deep reading of the brickwork to see if the brickwork was dry. You could use one of these. This one here with the 2 spikes on, that's used for detecting moisture again. You just push that into the brickwork, and that would give you a reading. This sensor on top is for taking relative humidity readings, and is quite good for giving you relative humidity, temperature, so on and so forth. Let me just switch this on to see if it'll come on. Alright, so now that's come on, it's going to give you the relative humidity. So the relative humidity it's saying is 26.6, and you think, well, what does that mean? Basically it's saying that the amount of moisture which is held in the air is relative. It's 26%, 100% is saturation. Doesn't mean that it's going to rain. It's just that when the temperature drops, what you'll find is, depending on what the dew point is, which is the point at what the place cools, then you would get condensation on the surface. So this is what's known as a Protimeter, and there are various other attachments with it. This is an extension for that. Now, there's been a lot of criticism with these, because sometimes you'll get building surveyors that come into a building and they'll have one of those, and they'll put this attachment in and start jabbing the wall. Now, these are only calibrated for timber, nothing else. So the readings that you get from these are going to be quite, let's say, general, yeah? And so, you know, I could go into detail about radio waves and how they work and everything else like that, but basically this is what a lot of people use on brickwork and everything else, and even I was using it. If you look at some of my videos, obviously said that I've moved on since then, and what I have here is a Tramex. Oh, going back to this one, how it works is you've got a sensor. See that bump on the back there? that would go against the wall as well, and that would be able to pick up on the amount of moisture. But what this gives you is a reading which is to do with a scale of 1 to 100. So it's a comparative scale. So you're thinking, well, compared to what? That hasn't got any internal comparative or external comparative sheets that you can use. Also, this has to be calibrated on a yearly basis. And so if someone is doing any kind of work for you, you need to know that, one, they go into the building and they calibrate this. This is done by holding those two buttons down simultaneously once they're in the building to get it to calibrate to the relative humidity of the building. Otherwise, it could be set for a higher humidity level or a lower, and then they'd come into your building, put that on the wall, and they would then get a higher reading because it hasn't been calibrated to your environment. This one here is a Tramex. This, I won't turn it over actually, but it has got rubber. This is what's known as non-destructive testing. Okay, so if you look on this one here, at the moment I'm calibrating this. This one comes with its own salt kit, so you can calibrate it. So that kit should give you a relative humidity of about 75%. Now at the moment it is still reading, and it's gone up to 43%. There is a procedure to calibrate this one, and this one has to be left for a while. Going back to the Protimeter to calibrate it, you have something in here. Let's get that out. There you go. So the two pins go onto there, which of these would be placed onto that there, and that would give you a reading to see if it is calibrated. Albeit that is still only calibrated for timber. This one is calibrated for timber, brickwork, blockwork, laminated floors, and roofs as well. I haven't used it yet, but I'm going to start to use this one soon. These are the long probes that can go into, you can see there the long probes, so they can go quite deep into the wall, whether it be a rubble filled wall that you have with some of the older type solid buildings, not synonymous with Staffordshire, but in other areas where you've got listed buildings. And so this would be able to give you a reading, which is, this uses a comparative valuation again. Now the comparative valuation that this would give you, obviously if you're looking at timber, they would say it's 5%, and the way you determine whether or not something is dry, just bear with me a second, I've just dropped my thing on the floor. Right, okay, so this is a chart, and this tells you whether or not at what point certain materials, so we've got brick, mortar, concrete and wood. So basically, if wood has got 5% moisture content, that's great. If it goes up to over 15, you can see there that we're starting to get problems. And if we go into 20%, you can see that that's a danger zone there. Over that, it's starting to get damp. With brickwork, it starts at 30%. So you need something which is going to be sensitive to and give you the scale. Now this uses a comparative scale. So with this one using brickwork, you wouldn't look along here because this is 100% relative humidity, but it gives you an indication. I can't go into too much detail with that, but this uses a comparative scale, which you can use reliably to be able to determine what the moisture content is of the brickwork. Now, that said, you could then say, well, is the brick wet or is it dry? You just have to look into whether or not it was water coming from a potable water source, which is a leak, internal leak, or it's coming from the ground. See my other video for chemical analysis of penetrating damp, condensation, moisture, whatever you want to call it. With this unit again, not only is it calibrated for timber, but I think it's calibrated for about 20 or 30 different types of timber. So let's say, for instance, you go into a room, the relative humidity is say 20%, and then you're going to push the probes into oak, which is a much more solid timber. Or you had oak in the room and you add pine in the room, okay, or redwood, or whatever they call it, or white, or red deal, or white deal. Now, looking at this meter, you can calibrate it for the relative humidity of the room. So this one just picks up on the relative humidity. This one can be calibrated for the relative humidity of the room, as well as the temperature
and then you can then calibrate it for that particular type of timber. So that is very, very good. So it covers quite a lot of the issues that you can find. It's much more finely tuned. Some timbers in some atmospheres will accept condensation more and some won't. So that's a good little bit of kit there. Coming over now to, oh, by the way, this is the salt kit that you use to calibrate this. According to the manufacturers, this should be done 30 days before you go on to any building site or to deal with any issues on anybody's properties. Within the kits that you get these plugs that can be drilled into the brickwork or into a concrete slab. This particular model isn't specialist for concrete slabs, but it can be used to get a relative reading. And you can put these plugs in, you can go back at a later date, sorry, the plugs there, take those out, put the hygrometer into those plugs, and then it will give you a relative humidity of the environment, where the holes that you've drilled. With a timber floor, you have this item here, which is used for going in. There's two spikes on the bottom of there, and that gives you a deep penetration of any timber. This slides up and down, so it gives you a pneumatic movement so that you can then force this into any timber. This is then connected to the meter again, and you can then get a reading. This is a handheld one, which is similar to this one over here. As you can imagine, you're trying to get that into the timber, but you could actually, this one has got a better grip. Sorry, you can't see that there. So it gives you a much more positive grip. And this has got little spikes on the end, and these get pushed into the brickwork again. That's something there which is called a log tag. I'll go into that at another date. And so them are the two different types. There are other different types of, there are other different types of moisture meter that you can get out there. The first one that I showed you, which was yellow, the Protimeter, is a good place to start. Having said that, it should not be used on anything apart from timber. And if people use it like surveyors or damp-proof course companies, then you need to question whether or not that's the appropriate tool or instrument for your particular, for the use basically. Is it appropriate for timber, or is it being calibrated for brickwork, and is it suitable for brickwork? So that's just a very, very quick, I keep saying apologies for that, very quick journey over two of the different instruments that can be used for brickwork, or for looking at, not I say brickwork, what I mean is you can use them for that, and you can use it for plaster, you can use it for other things. The yellow one, which is the Protimeter, is not as reliable as the Tramex. And if, say for instance, as a surveyor, you went to court and you had to say what you used and the methods that you used, if you were using a Tramex, you'd be in a lot better position than you would be if you were using the Protimeter, because with the Tramex you can say how you calibrated it, what materials it you use, comparative scales and things like that. So if someone comes in and they want to look at your building and they are saying that they're going to test for damp in the walls, just be wary if they're using one of those, or when I say those, the Protimeter, or they're using something which they've got from one of the local hardware shops, which has got two prongs on as well. There's a lot more to it, because there could be salts in the walls, there could be metals or fragments of metals in the walls. Sometimes there's foil-backed wallpaper that can cause a problem as well. So further investigation needs to be done. So this is Neville Douglas signing off from Enchanted Property Letting. If you like this, then click on the like button. If you don't like it, then click on the don't like button. Subscribe to the channel as well. Okay.